This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us for this first edition. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, a major winter storm will be heading across the country, bringing snow, ice, and cold temperatures from the southwest to the east coast. And a funeral service in Houston today for former President George H.W. Bush after Wednesday's emotional service in Washington, D.C. Plus, a look at Israel's latest military action to take out terror tunnels to protect itself against the terrorist group Hezbollah, and how the Satanic Temple has donated its own image to go alongside a nativity scene at the Illinois Capitol. All those stories and much more ahead today in this edition of Newswatch. We want to begin, though, with the nation bracing for what forecasters say could be a coast-to-coast winter weather event, bringing extremely cold temperatures, snow, and ice. Meteorologists are predicting the storm system, which will move all the way from the southwest to the mid-Atlantic, could affect millions of people. Depending on where it hits and the temperatures at various areas, there could be flooding, ice, snow, and rain, bringing power outages and making life miserable from one side of the nation to the other, with at least a dozen states getting snow and another 20 more getting very cold rain. At the United Nations Climate Summit in Poland, the UN Secretary General is urging world leaders to take the threat of climate change seriously. Antonio Guterres says bold action is needed if nations are to prevent a catastrophic rise in temperatures before the end of the century. But some anti-government protesters in France aren't buying it. They launched massive protests and riots in Paris to thwart the government plans to implement a heavy carbon tax on gasoline. That caused French President Macron to cancel the tax increase, at least for now. Heritage Foundation economist Stephen Moore says a doom and gloom lobby is pushing the climate change agenda in America and around the world.
I estimate that the climate change industrial complex, and that's what we have today, is tens and tens of billions of dollars to spread this doom and gloom. We've created whole industries of climate scientists to come up with these models that predict the world is coming to an end.
Senior international correspondent Gary Lane is following the story for us and joins us now. So, Gary, what else did Antonio Guterres say about the climate change?
Well, he said what you'd expect, Ephraim. What he told people at this summit in Poland is, look, if we don't do something right away, this is so urgent, if we don't do something right away to address climate change, we're going to see the polar caps melting and then the sea levels rising, and that will destroy our shores and our coasts. In addition to that, we'll see torrential rains and flooding, and also the air pollution is going to cause a problem, lead to death for people in places like Beijing and elsewhere, and also shortages of water around the world that could lead to death and destruction. More doom and gloom, as Moore said.
Yeah. How are world leaders responding?
Well, world leaders are pushing back a bit. The host of the summit is the Polish President Duda, and what Polish President Duda said is, look, we've got 80% of our energy here in Poland comes from coal. That's where we get our energy. And despite the fact that this is a carbon fuel, guess what? We have reduced carbon emissions by 30%. So that's a pushback from Poland. Other leaders are a little concerned about the effects of people like in Paris rioting when they try to address the climate change by increasing the taxes on fuel, and people are pushing back. They're saying, wait a minute, this is too much. We can't handle this.
Yeah, as you said, people are indeed pushing back in France against this fuel tax increase. What do Americans think about it?
Well, our gasoline is very low. As a matter of fact, around the Thanksgiving holiday, we had some very record low levels, at least for this year. And most Americans are saying, look, we believe that there is a problem. We don't think we're going to see it in our lifetimes. But they do believe, depending on which party you're in, Ephraim, if you're a Democrat, 87% of Democrats say, yes, we think that humans have something to do with this climate change. Only 40% of Republicans say the same thing. So there's mixed reaction, polarization in America on that, as there are on many other issues. But really, I think a lot of people just say, okay, this cooling we're feeling right now, the cold temperatures, probably from the sunspots, lack of activity from the sun right now.
All right, Gary Lane, thank you so much for that report. A funeral service will be held today for former President George H.W. Bush at St. Martin's Episcopal Church in Houston, where the 41st president and his family worshiped. People lined up Wednesday night to pay their respects to Bush following Wednesday's emotional funeral at the National Cathedral in Washington. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy brings us this look at the powerful farewell.
From the Capitol Hill steps to the halls of the National Cathedral and beyond.
I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth.
The country honored the nation's 41st president, George Herbert Walker Bush. George W. Bush delivered the eulogy for his father, the last person he spoke to before passing away.
I said, "Dad, I love you and you've been a wonderful father." And the last words he would ever say on earth were, "I love you too."
Seated in the front row alongside the Bush family was President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump, along with former Presidents Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter. Christian recording artist Michael W. Smith, a longtime friend of the Bush family, sang Friends.
Though it's hard to let you go, in the Father's hands we know.
It means something because I've been friends with him for 29 years. And so the fact that he wanted me to sing at his funeral, it's just an honor beyond words, it really is.
Smith recalled seeing President Bush a mere months before he passed away.
As we were leaving, we just gave him hugs and said, "Hey, we love you. We love you. Thanks. Just so good to see you." And then, about the time we were back, he kind of get his little finger in the air and he had that little sparkle in his eye. He said, "Friends are friends forever." That's what he said. That's the last thing he said to us.
And now you're singing Friends.
It's crazy. And Deb and I walked out there thinking, you know what? That might be the last time that we see him.
Reverend Dr. Russell Levinson was with the former president in his final days and shared a moment he witnessed between Bush and his former Secretary of State James Baker, a man he called his little brother.
Secretary Baker was at the foot of the president's bed, and toward the end, Jim Baker rubbed and stroked the president's feet for perhaps half an hour. The president smiled at the comfort of his dear friend. Here I witnessed a world leader who was serving a servant who had been our world's leader. And what came to mind was Jesus.
The 94-year-old served his country as president, vice president, World War II veteran, and even CIA director. He guided the U.S. through the Gulf War and the breakup of the Soviet Union.
He stood in the breach against tyranny and discrimination. And on his watch, a wall fell in Berlin. A dictator's aggression did not stand.
But one of his proudest moments was that of a husband and a father. Married more than 7 decades to Barbara, their marriage would bring 6 children, including George, who followed in Dad's footsteps as the country's 43rd president.
A great and noble man, the best father a son or daughter could have. And in our grief, let us smile knowing that Dad is hugging Robin and holding Mom's hand again.
Now, former President Bush is only the 19th person to be honored with a state funeral. His casket is in Houston, Texas for a service, and he will be buried next to his wife Barbara and his daughter Robin, who died at just 3 years old. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the White House.
In just a few minutes, we'll hear from a speechwriter for former President George W. Bush about the legacy of his father, the late President George Herbert Walker Bush. Here now are a few of the headlines we're following for you today inside the CBN newsroom. The Illinois Capitol Rotunda has a brand new Christmas display this year. Alongside the nativity scene and Hanukkah menorah stands an arm holding an apple with a snake coiled around it. The unusual sculpture, called Snaketivity, it was donated by the Satanic Temple. The piece also has a sign that says, "Knowledge is the world's greatest gift." Lex Manicore, a leader and spokesperson for the group, told the State Journal-Register the arm represents Eve in the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve disobeyed God by eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He says his group sees Satan as a hero in that story for spreading knowledge. He added the group does not worship Satan or believe he exists, but sees the fallen angel as a metaphor for rebellion in the face of religious tyranny. Churches in Austin, Texas may soon be forced to hire LGBT employees if a city ordinance is implemented. The city says it guarantees, quote, the opportunity for each person to obtain employment without regard to race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, age, or disability. The Houston-based U.S. Pastor Council and the group Texas Values is suing the city. They both argue the ordinance forces churches to go against their biblical beliefs. The search for people unaccounted for after the deadliest U.S. wildfire in at least a century is winding down in Northern California. There are 11 names left on the list that once had 1,300 names. Called the Camp Fire, the blaze burned for 17 days, killing 85 people and scorching more than 153,000 acres of land. Paradise, California was virtually destroyed by the flames, but this cross from Our Savior Lutheran Church was not destroyed. Pastor Brandon Merrick posted it in the heart of the tragedy, and the story of the cross is still being told. Part of his message read, "For me, this picture is not just a heartbreaking reminder of what can happen to things and people of this world. This is our one true hope in the midst of tragedy that cannot be destroyed by anything. God is with us." Today on CBN's Faith Nation, we're going to take a look at how politics can get back to a place of civility in today's highly charged climate. That's on Faith Nation at 6 p.m. on the CBN News Channel. Can America still have a future? That is the subject we're looking at on tonight's Global Lane program on the CBN News Channel.
I'm Gary Lane. Are America's best days ahead, or are we headed for disaster? Wall Builders President David Barton says it depends on the choices we make in education and morality. Barton says right now, 3/4 of American young people no longer believe in moral absolutes.
When there is no right and wrong, then you're polarized. The thing we had at the Great Depression was you didn't have crime outbreaks, even though there was depression and poverty, because everybody still believed the Ten Commandments, and you believed the Golden Rule, and you believed the Good Samaritan. We don't have that moral foundation today.
And it was full speed ahead for the American economy this year. We'll talk to Stephen Moore for his prediction on what you and your family can expect in 2019. Watch these segments and more on this week's episode of The Global Lane, tonight at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on the CBN News Channel.
And a quick reminder, as Gary just said, you can see The Global Lane tonight at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel. Up next, across the country, as the country remembers the President George H.W. Bush, we're going to hear some insights about his legacy from a former speechwriter for his son, President George W. Bush. We're going to have that interview when we come back.
God Almighty is a God of blessing. He always wants to bless His people. But how do you get that blessing? And what principles will unlock that secret?
In Miraculous Blessings, Pat Robertson shows you how to open the floodgates of God's awesome blessings in your life.
In order to have a blessing, you've got to be blessable.
Discover what the Bible has to say about God's covenant of blessing, the laws of blessing, and what are the hindrances to the blessings of God.
The words of Jesus, they are as valid as the law of gravity, and if we follow those laws, we will be blessed.
You'll see amazing true stories of everyday people whose lives were rescued and transformed by God's miraculous blessings.
But even the doctors acknowledged that this had to be a miracle.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com to become a CBN partner and get miraculous blessings today.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphan's Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
As we shared earlier, you saw people across the country and the world honoring former President George H.W. Bush Wednesday. They bid a final farewell during a national cathedral service. Their beloved former president touched numerous lives and left an unforgettable legacy. CBN's Heather Sells spoke with Rob Schwartzalder of Regent University. He's a former speechwriter for George W. Bush. He shared some insights about how George H.W. Bush's impact will live on.
This funeral, the tribute that his son paid to him, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think how anybody cannot be moved by watching a devoted son say farewell to his father, and to hear the obvious love and loyalty that came through. There's nothing feigned, nothing fake about that.
Right, and it's so interesting because here you have two of the most incredibly powerful men, and yet when it came down to it, it's really their family relationship that they're reflecting on.
People ask what George H.W. Bush will be remembered for, and I think we could say the same thing of President George W. Bush. Both of them are deeply committed to their families. Family is central. In the nation's capital, in the Capitol Dome, the quarry of Bush children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren was huge. These are people who deeply loved their father, great-grandfather, grandfather. That kind of commitment is something that's genuine, that comes from the heart, and that's a real tribute to him.
Yeah, and such a blessing for our country, really. Let me ask you, so you were doing speech writing for George W. Bush, but it sounds like you also saw the imprint of his father on his presidency. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. One is that neither man took himself too seriously. Both of them had the ability to laugh at themselves. We heard during the funeral service several speakers talk about his sense of humor. At the same time, they brought great dignity to the office because although they didn't take themselves personally, they took the presidency with great seriousness. They understood that the stakes were high. There was no room for the kind of moral lapse that we have seen in other administrations. They wanted to stay the course faithfully for the American people and as a testimony to their own families, and uphold that sense of dignity that really seems to characterize the Bush family.
That's really beautiful. The farewell from former Senator Bob Dole yesterday is getting a lot of attention. The 95-year-old was helped from his wheelchair to stand and salute his longtime colleague and fellow World War II veteran. What do you see as the legacy or the impact of that military service that George H.W. Bush had on his administration in the country?
I think he went into conflict with a real sense that people are actually affected by this. This isn't something out of a novel or out of a movie. His two crewmen on his Avenger flight were killed. He was the only one who survived. He almost got captured by the Japanese. Two of their boats were actually coming in his direction before he was rescued. So he understood the stakes. He knew that sending Americans into combat was as serious as it gets. So when he did initiate our efforts to get Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, he did that with a mindfulness. They need to be the best equipped, best trained, best led service personnel in the world. And that was a real tribute to his commitment to excellence in military leadership.
Wow. Well, a lot we can learn. How do you think history will remember him? What do you think will be the imprint that he will leave?
I think calm statesmanship in the midst of a storm. The other day, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, said he was one of the fathers of German reunification. He kept a steady hand. He let everyone know America will be strong. America will do its best for our country. Along with that, we will make sure that the rest of the world is as safe a place it can be for everyone. That's a tremendous legacy for any president to leave.
Right. Rob Schwartzwalder, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Still ahead, how the Israeli Defense Forces are destroying tunnels that the terrorist group Hezbollah could have used to capture parts of the Jewish state. We're going to have that story from Jerusalem when we come back.
Parents, the Superbook Bible app is a great way to get your child reading the Bible, because in today's busy world, we can use some help. The free Superbook Bible app has fun stuff your kids will love. They'll have a blast learning the Bible, playing great games, watching cool videos, discovering heroes in the Bible. They'll have fun while they learn God's Word. The Superbook Kids Bible app, available now.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life, life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
We had 4 jobs that didn't go right. But, we didn't waver in our faith.
That's when God put on my heart that we needed to do the well.
Within a couple of days, we got an insurance refund check that we had no idea was coming.
And here we are, this year, it's just boom.
You go out and help other people, and you get rewarded for it.
Get Pat Robertson's latest teaching, Miraculous Blessings.
And welcome back. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Hezbollah, which is backed by Iran, was planning to use tunnels to carry out a deadly infiltration and capture parts of Galilee in northern Israel. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Forces continue to expose and destroy those terror tunnels. Here's CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell with that story from Jerusalem.
These are Hezbollah operatives making their way through an attack tunnel that begins in Lebanon and continues inside Israel. The IDF distributed the footage showing the men approaching a hidden IDF camera, an explosion, and the men running away.
These cross-border terror tunnels were built by Hezbollah with direct support and funding from Iran. They were built with one purpose in mind: to attack and murder innocent Israeli men, women, and children. This is a grave violation of Israel's sovereignty.
According to the IDF, this tunnel begins in the Lebanese village of Kfar Kila. It's about 650 feet long, including about 120 feet inside Israel, and is about 80 feet deep. This IDF graphic shows how the tunnel crosses the border. Israel announced it had begun what it's calling Operation Northern Shield on Tuesday, and went into action to expose the tunnels along its northern border. This footage shows how close the Lebanese population lives to the border and just how well they can see what's going on inside Israel. On the Israeli side, agricultural fields and orchards flank the border. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said he had a message for the people of Lebanon.
Hezbollah is putting your lives in danger. They are sacrificing your well-being to serve the aggressive purposes of Iran. Israel holds the Lebanese government accountable for all terror activity emanating from Lebanon against Israel.
Since the end of the Second Lebanon War in 2006, UN Resolution 1701 required UN forces to essentially maintain a Hezbollah-free zone next to the border. But Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, said the UN's forces in Lebanon aren't doing the job.
UNIFIL's mission is to prevent the buildup of arms and military infrastructure in southern Lebanon. Clearly, it is not doing enough.
Danon called on the UN to condemn Hezbollah's actions.
Israel has no interest in escalation, but we will do whatever it takes to defend our sovereignty and our citizens. The Security Council must condemn this terrorist threat.
So far, Hezbollah hasn't responded to the Israeli operation. In the meantime, Israel is continuing to expose and destroy the tunnels in an operation expected to last a few weeks. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And still ahead, what was the most popular online Bible verse in 2018? We're going to have the answer when we come back. Stay with us.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphan's Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now. Bring home a miracle this holiday season with Superbook's newest episode, Jesus Feeds the Hungry.
I have never seen a miracle this great.
Superbook Jesus Feeds the Hungry. Yours when you join the Superbook Club. And if you act by December 31st, you'll receive 3 copies of The First Christmas is Our Way of Saying Thanks. Plus, call now to receive 3 copies of the all-new Superbook Fun-Filled Activity Book, Jesus Feeds the Hungry. Available now.
The most popular online Bible verse of this year comes from the book of Isaiah. That is according to the YouVersion Bible app, which says that Isaiah 41:10 was the most shared, bookmarked, and highlighted verse of 2018 among its 350 million users around the world. The verse reads, "Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand." The YouVersion Bible app, by the way, has more than 1,800 versions in 1,250 languages, and Bible reading in the app is on the rise on several continents. You can find out more about which countries are seeing the most growth in Bible reading by checking out this story at CBNNews.com. Well, time now for your Thursday Thankful, and I hope you will join me in this prayer of gratitude today. God, I thank you for my flaws, and while I may magnify them, you don't see them. You see me for who I can be in you. With that prayer of gratitude, I hope you will make today indeed a thankful Thursday. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. Remember that you can always find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at CBNNews.com. And we would love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, on Twitter, as well as Instagram. While this concludes this newscast, remember the news continues 24/7 at CBNNews.com. We're updating it for you 24/7. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make this a thankful Thursday. We'll see you tomorrow.